Wait for some people to hop in. Happy Monday, Monday Fun Day. Y'all already know the drill with Mondays. Also, I have a new Instagram that I have up for now. Hopefully, I can still get the other one back. But in the meantime, the username on that is actually just Jasmine Jafar. JAZMEN JAFAR. So new Instagram, follow me there. It's not on that beacons, but if you go to jasminejafar.me, maybe the moderator can throw it up really quickly. I should have said something before. You can follow me on all my socials. And today is Monday Fun Day, so you guys know what that means. It means we're going live here. We're gonna be, talking about some real shit here, and then we're gonna get freaky deaky on the live afterwards on my OnlyFans. So I love the Monday routine we have going on here. I know a lot of you come from here and then you join me there, and it's kind of like the little thing we got going on. You get your mind fulfilled, and then you get other parts of your body fulfilled. I'm like a one-stop shop, Good evening, happy Monday for everyone that it's evening for. It is evening here. Okay, so yeah, that's over. If you guys want, the new Instagram is Jasmine Jafar, and my link is over there where you can access all my socials. And you can also join us on the Fun Live. That's what I used to have to call it on TikTok, because you were like, have to be so careful on TikTok. I was like, the Fun Live, not the one-stop shop. I am for sure the one-stop shop for your mental and physical needs, okay? At least virtually. I wouldn't say you should rely on me in every way, but that's that. Hopefully I will get the other Instagram back up at some point, but it's taken a while. So I'm just going to start a new one. Ooh, I'm building some muscle here, you guys. I've been working with a trainer, and I feel like, watch out. Are you from LA? No, but I know I look like I'm from LA because a lot of Persian people are in LA. So I feel like, and when I'm in other places of the world, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest kind of for a lot of my life. And I felt so unique. And then every time I go to LA, I'm like, oh, everybody looks like me. We love a muscle mommy. Okay. So we're going to talk about something that I find really fascinating today, which is attraction, desire, all of that. So this is going to be pretty much entirely influenced by a Huberman Lab podcast I was listening to. If you don't listen to that, I just watched the YouTube videos. Alex Huberman, he, I believe, is a researcher at Stanford. I don't know too much about his background. I usually skip that part. I want to get to the juice, the research. But if you like really science-based information on a variety of topics, I feel like his podcast is really great. I recommend it. And I listened to Isn't He a Doctor? He might be. Again, I don't know much about his background, but I listen to him a lot because I really like his approach to things, being so backed in science, research, etc. And it's very thorough. So I listened to that 2-hour podcast on love, attraction, and desire. And that I was gonna so I took a bunch of notes on it, and I was going to go in and look at all the studies he talked about. Didn't have time to do a lot of that. Got a little bit of time for that. So a lot of this is literally just going to be me taking what he said and then kind of opening up a discussion, seeing what you guys think about it. So that is what we're going to do today. I do like talking about this stuff because I feel like so much of the shit on the internet on love and desire and attraction is just fucking pseudoscience, pop psychology. Like if you on YouTube, the 7 ways to be irresistible, and this is no. And it's not going to help you maintain or sustain a long-term relationship or anything like that, if that's what you're going for, or any kind of true meaningful bond, which, as we've talked about in past episodes, is really critical to happiness. So I'm kind of like building on each episode, I feel like, of this podcast. His view on attraction is the same as Freud's, is it? No. And he's not talking about his view, which I really like. He's just talking about what we know so far about attraction. And he goes into a lot of things. I'm not going to talk about everything. I'm not going to really talk too much about the the stuff of a woman is more attractive, which this is true. I mean, maybe now that I'm mentioning it, men find women more attractive and women find men more attractive in her ovulatory stage of her cycle. And women who are on birth control, they don't see this in that. Doesn't mean you don't find people attractive in general, but we do have a biological, we are animals at the end of the day. And I remember I'm like, I've heard this before, and I'm on birth control, and I'm like, imagine if I wasn't, I'd be even hotter to you. Just kidding. Yes, welcome to everybody new. Do you believe there are only two genders? I believe that there are two biological sexes, but that gender expression is a spectrum. So I don't know what that has to do with this. But anyway, so I'm going to be looking down at my notes a lot of the time. Also, something he said in the beginning that I thought was funny is like most PhDs last longer than most marriages. How crazy is that? I want to go get my PhD. So I was always choosing between a Juris Doctor, so being a lawyer, or a PhD in psych. And then I became a lawyer and now I do sex work. And if I can, when you guys don't want to see me anymore, when when my tits are down to my knees, I'll go get my PhD in psych. But the first thing he talks about, which I was really happy to hear, is attachment styles. So I think I mentioned this book before, and he brought up this book. And it's called Attached, and it'll go in. It's the new science of adult attachment. And like he said, it seems very like pop psychology, but it's not. It's actually super research based, and really goes into the psychology of attachment. And I recommend it. I recommended it before, and Hazard Stint read it, and I think from what I hear, he really likes it. He goes back to it all the time. And basically what this book is based off of is, I don't know how many of you guys are familiar, or how many, I think like if you even took like an intro to psych class in college. I know I majored in psych, but I feel like even before that, I'd heard about this study, the strange situation experiment, which took place and I believe, was it the 80s? I don't remember exactly when it was, but it's a very famous study where they looked at children and how children would respond when their caregiver would leave the room. So they would bring a bunch of kids in, or not a bunch of kids, but like they put a kid in a room. I guess, yeah, they were looking at a bunch of kids, but one at a time in a room, and with a bunch of toys, and with usually their mother. So their mother was in the room with the kid, and they would see how the kid would behave and react when the mother was there, and then what would happen when the mother would leave, how the kid would react, and then how the kid would react when the mother returned to the room. So, and then they looked at those kids and they put these kids into different categories based off of don't get me started on psych. I'm still traumatized by statistics. Stats was a really hard class. And I feel like a lot of majors, like the psych major, yeah, we had to take stats. And I was like, oh, why do I take this? I got it. I was a therapist. Before I got my law degree. A psych background and training makes you a better lawyer. I think so. I know philosophy majors do the best on the LSAT, and philosophy and math, which makes sense because you're just analyzing logic, stuff like that. But I also think social sciences, although they say they don't score as well, were the exception. Hazard Stint give us a great book review. Excellent book for anyone looking to better understand how they relate, attach, and depend on others in both healthy and unhealthy ways. It's given me much more insight into my own past relationships and why they didn't work. I agree with this wholeheartedly. So I do recommend the book and understanding your attachment style for sure, especially even if you have a secure attachment style, which we'll get into in a little bit. It's just, you'll be able to better understand people around you. And I hope nobody in this chat is the kind of person that's going to look up when you meet somebody, their fucking star sign and their moon rising, and you're going to look at an app that's going to tell you, depending on where you were born in the position of the stars, how compatible you're going to be with someone. Please, please. I hope nobody in here is doing that. Don't think this is the kind of crowd in here, but that's not the way to go. What you maybe could look at is trying to determine their attachment style so you can better understand how it's going to interact with yours and figure out if you better meet their needs, or if understand maybe why they behave the way they behave, like Hazard Stint just said. I think that's a much better route to go, and you can look at some other things too, but hopefully nobody's looking at their sun sign. All right. I have a doctorate in philosophy. That makes you in my opinion, a cool person. Like, a lot of people are like, oh, what are you going to do with a philosophy major? I'm like, be a cool human being and understand the world and shit. Waiting for Penguin Emperor to join the chat. I don't know. Do you think we scared him off? I mean, he's welcome to join the chat. I don't know what he's going to disagree with today, because today it's not going to be a lot of opinion. It's going to be science. So I think it might be a little harder for him to be contrarian like he likes to be. But So anyways, back to the situation experiment. I'm going to read the different, what they found in the different kids. Where is it? So yeah, so the secure kids, and then yeah, they followed these kids throughout their lives, and they found that there was differences in how their lives turned out and how they behaved in life based off of the attachment style that they were showing in this experiment. So the point of it is the attachment style that you have as a child is going to kind of predict how you're going to be as an adult. And we don't know entirely how people get the attachment styles that they get. For a long time, maybe we like, and I think to a degree, it does depend on how your parents engage with you, et cetera. But I don't think it's, and this book even talks about, it's not that way entirely. And sometimes it may just be genetic. People will argue science till their last breath. Yeah, I mean, but it's harder than me being like, I like this. If I said I like pizza, he'd be like, well, you don't like tacos. So I don't think he's going to be able to do that. But, and however, attachment styles, it doesn't have to be the same. So we have neuroplasticity, which means that we are plastic human beings and we are able to change. So there are people who may start out as one and then can either work on becoming more secure, or sometimes people start as secure and then things happen in their life that changes their attachment style. And they found that this study, which this book really goes into, and the researchers of this book really go into, is, okay, well, that's attachment styles with your parents and bonding, but does that transfer into romantic relationships? And they found that it really does. So the types that they found in those kids was the secure. So the children who are securely attached are generally happy and trusting. They are attached to their caregiver and enjoy being with them, but are secure enough to explore the world and test the limits of their independence. So these kids, when their parents were in the room, they were fine. They were able to play. They wouldn't wander like off too much, because their parents are still there. So they still are like attached to their parent, etc. But they weren't showing any signs of distress, nothing. When the parent left, they were also still like, oh, okay, where did my mom go? But they were fine. They were totally fine. And then when the parent came back, they were fine. They showed love and affection to the parent. The main reason, okay, let me read what's going on here. The science stuff, look up the doc of, it's all nonsense. Okay, I was like, oh no, someone's in here just defending this. I'm gonna have a headache. Yeah, there are a lot of, me and Hazard Stan, I showed him there's like an article on like debunking astrology in less than 200 worlds. And it's like the astrology, like the stupidity of astrology is making me go into retrograde. It was like a quick little short article that does reference multiple studies where people think, it's called the Barnum effect, I think, where people think things apply to them when they're very vague, when they don't. Like, we are self-centered human beings, like we've talked about in past episodes. So, the reason people argue science is because science can change. Oh, no. Yeah, I'm not saying that science is set in stone. In fact, I think when science does change, and when people can build on science or learn something new, that's celebrated in science. But I don't know how you're going to argue, unless you're going to run a peer-reviewed empirical study right now, or find the limitations of these study, which there are always limitations to the study, but that doesn't support a different conclusion necessarily. That just means that maybe more research needs to be done. And I have been arguing this to the death for people who are talking about the sudden deaths and COVID. It's driving me crazy how people don't understand that. Like, I agree, we need more research on this, but just because we need more research on this, or there are limitations to the research that we have that shows it's not related to the vaccine, doesn't support your completely opposite conclusion. Like, some people just really don't want to know that. Okay, I'm not going to click because I know that can irritate people listening with headphones. Skeptical of some subjects, I feel, become hyper-aware at some point. Yeah, so it depends on the study. And interestingly enough, before we had as much ethical concerns as we do now, I feel like the studies were better, or they taught us more, which is really bad. And I'm not arguing to go back, but I think what I look for is studies that are replicated over and over, findings that are replicated over and over, or anything that looks at the brain and, things that, so there are ways I like those better than self-report. So even in the podcast, he talks about how it's really hard to gauge infidelity and cheating because we have to go based off of self-reporting. And a lot of people are going to lie when they're self-reporting. Even when you can try to make it as confidential as possible, people are more likely to tell the truth, but you're still not going to get, people may have other motivations for not being honest in those kind of studies when you're going based off self-reporting. I even talked about this in the porn when we were talking about that a lot of times this addiction to porn is based on self-reporting, and maybe that can be triggered by your perception of porn. And if you view it negatively, you're going to think you have a problem with it because you consume it at all and you feel like you can't stop. So, and vice versa. Maybe you do have a problem with porn and you're in denial and you will say you don't, so it's hard when it's based off things like that. One of the pioneers in attached. Yeah. Yes, he is. He's actually the one who did he's the main psychologist behind the situation, the situation room, which is the experiment that I was talking about with children. So yes, that is the one. So then we had the avoidant children. So these were people that really just didn't show any love and affection to their caregiver. And then when the caregiver left, they just weren't really distraught. Like they just seemed very like detached and just like wanted their independence. They didn't seem to have a secure attachment to their parent. A child with an avoidant attachment style often displays early signs of independence, wanting to do things themselves rather than seek help from their parents or adults. Then we had the anxious kids, which these have different names. I'm kind of using the names that were in this book, but loving this chat engagement. I agree. And I have a lot to talk about, and I have to go to my other chat at 9. So maybe this will be 2 parts, which will be nice because then I can maybe look into some of the other stuff that I want to talk about longer. Yeah, we need to be educated, but think critically as well, especially with how the mainstream media is like TMZ when it shouldn't be. Yeah, exactly. And I think that I try to make it a point, and this like baffles me how people will throw out statistics or studies or whatever on the internet that are so clearly flawed, or they hear something and they just say it. It's one thing to it's unrealistic that everything you see on the internet, you're going to go do a deep dive and you're going to do it and you're just not going to read the abstract. You're going to go into the study. But if you're going to talk about it on the internet, at least, come on. That's where you should make sure, because you're not talking about everything you see on the internet. But if you are going to talk about it, at least make sure. And if you don't know, say, I don't know. Don't quote me on this. I may be wrong. And they just say it like there's just like this idea on the internet that the more confidently you say things, the more likely it is to be true. And it's not, right? What is that quote? The only wisdom in knowing is you know nothing. I forgot who said it. Was it Socrates? I don't know. Don't quote me on that, but somebody said something like that, and I feel like it's true. The people that are the most sure of themselves on the internet are the people you should be skeptical of. Okay, somebody's putting an ad in there. Critical thinking isn't taught in high school and you can avoid it in college. Yeah. I think critical thinking is best developed. I feel like I learned a lot of it in law school, but you can develop critical thinking skills in college and sooner. It depends. A good professor, good teachers can make all the difference in the world. And then your desire to want to do it. If you're just in school to pass, it's like learning a language, right? If you're just like, that was me with learning a language. Like I took Spanish all throughout high school and college. I don't know shit because I didn't care to learn it. I just wanted to get a good grade. So I would cram at the end and check off the boxes, and you don't really learn that way. All right. So it was Socrates. Okay, I was right. All right. So, and then the anxious or ambivalent children is what they call it. These kids were very clingy and like super anxious, kind of even when the parent was in the room. When the parent left, they would become like inconsolable, and then when the parent came back, they would be like really angry at the parent for leaving. And this is what we know as like the anxious attachment style. And then there was like what they call the disorganized attachment style, which I think is now correlated to this. There's a small group of people that are anxious and avoidant. And these people, children with a disorganized attachment style, often seem to struggle with managing their emotions. They may display anger and erratic behavior, but are just as likely to seem depressed, withdrawn, and unresponsive. And so we learned that adults have kind of the same, hold on. My phone is freaking out. Is it this? No, this is one of the studies I was looking at. What is going on? Okay, so yeah, then we looked at so they should teach high school / middle school like law classes as far as critical thinking to a point, but I'm going to be honest, like you can definitely develop your critical thinking skills no matter what age you are, but I think for some people it's just very difficult. It's not an easy skill to work on, and I don't think that, and this is hard for me because we're only with ourselves in our brain, so we're like, oh, like I love standardized testing. I think standardized testing is great. I excel at standardized testing, but standardized testing shouldn't be the only way like to gauge how smart you are or how qualified you are, to go to the next level or what classes you can take or what school you can get into necessarily. And I understand that argument as well. So I do believe we should teach everyone critical thinking skills, but how we do it is the question. The disorganized attached kids are the ones that will more likely become schizophrenic. I haven't seen that, but maybe they're more likely than their other kids. Maybe. I think schizophrenia has a lot of other, a lot more goes into what I don't know. But I also wouldn't be surprised by that if those kids are more likely than the other groups. Doesn't mean that they are likely though. I don't think so, but I could be wrong. I think that's not even what you're saying. I think you're just saying, yeah, that they're more likely maybe. So then as an adult, this book talks about how we have 4 attachment styles and that you can fall into. If you read this book, they even you can determine yours. They teach you how to determine your partners. They teach you what that means. There's an anxious avoidant trap where anxious people and avoidant people kind of go together, and that's a really terrible relationship, especially for the anxious person. So again, I really like this book. It's not a cause but a tendency. Yeah, that makes sense. You're talking about addiction? No, I'm talking about attachment and like romantic attachment. So the secure attachment style refers to the ability to form secure, loving relationships with others. A person with a secure attachment style is able to trust others and be trusted, love and accept love, become close to others with relative ease. They're not afraid of intimacy, nor do they feel panic when their partners need time or space away from them. They're able to depend on others without becoming totally dependent. About 56% of adults have a secure attachment type, according to the foundational attachment research by social psychologists. So this is according to one, but I think the stats in here were similar. I think it's around that type. Yeah, I'm talking about relationships too. Well, welcome from France. Happy you're here. Anxious attachment. So anxious attachment is a type of insecure attachment style marked by a deep fear of abandonment. People with an anxious attachment style tend to be very insecure about their relationships, often worrying about whether their partners will leave them, and thus are always hungry for validation. Anxious attachment is associated with neediness or clingy behavior, such as getting anxious when your partner doesn't text back fast enough and constantly feeling like your partner doesn't care enough about you. So that's anxious. Avoidant attachment style is a type of insecure attachment style marked by a fear of intimacy. People with an avoidant attachment style tend to have trouble getting close to others or trusting others in relationships because they ultimately don't believe their needs can be met in a relationship. In relationships, avoidant people typically maintain some distance from their partners or are largely emotionally unavailable. We hear that all the time. They may even find relationships suffocating and avoid them completely, preferring to be independent and rely on themselves. And then you can even have like fearful avoidant, which is that 4th category, which this book says like avoidant and attached, which they have a little bit of both in it. So this is a rare category, I think, from what I remember. But some people do fall into it. Sounds like the secure attachment types are the best are the ones that have avoided being cheated on, or at least not aware this happened. Not always, but cheating or infidelity can take you from secure to insecure or avoidant. So that is true, but there are also secure people that are able to remain. Being secure doesn't mean that you don't get cheated on. And I think a lot of secure people have been cheated on, but they don't view it the same way as maybe an insecure attached person, or they don't fear it all the time the way an insecure attached person is more likely to fear. And like I said, neuroplasticity is a thing, and we are able to shift our attachment styles through doing the work. Now, being secure is obviously where everybody wants to go. And the book talks about how like a secure person with another secure person is a good relationship. A secure person with an anxious person can be a good relationship too. So insecure people, or an insecure person and a secure person, can be a good relationship too, because when an insecure's needs are met, like let's say you're a secure person and your partner has an insecure attachment style, if the secure person knows that and they know how to soothe that insecure person, which we're going to talk about later in other ways, that insecure person is not going to get triggered. That insecurity is not going to be triggered, and you can have a good relationship. Same with the secure person and the avoidant person. Now, an avoidant person and an insecure person is a recipe for disaster. But basically, we all want the secure people. You 50-something%, we want that. Anxious attachment folks are likely to have personality disorders. These are the ones who are afraid of attachment, are more likely to be depressed. Maybe. I think that makes sense. All right. Now people are talking in French. Don't know much. I just like Spanish, I actually visit France quite a bit because I have family over there, and I make a conscious choice to not ever learn it. So that's me for you. So yeah, I think figuring out your attachment style can be a great thing. So then the next thing that, oh my God, why do I keep doing that? So the next thing that goes on in the podcast, or he talks about in the podcast, is your autonomic, oh my God, that word is going to drive me crazy. And I probably have to say it a bunch of times. Autonomic, your autonomic nervous system. So your autonomic nervous system is so important and so integral to forming attachment and your love and romantic relationships. And it can be influenced obviously by your attachment style. And so your autonomic nervous system controls things like digestion, breathing, how alert or sleepy you are. So when you're alert and you're kind of anxious, you're on one side of it. And then when you're calm and you're relaxed, you're on the other. So it's about this seesaw that we all kind of have, is how he described it. And your autonomic tone is about how quickly you're hinged. Are you easy to calm? Are you somebody that is really high alert and anxious? And they did a study, which I wrote in my notes. Where is it? Your automatic tone is about how tight that hinge is, how easily we can calm. So there was a study done during World War II where they showed that and this is not the only study, that this may be determined by your caregiver. And they found that if the mothers were really stressed, during a bomb, and they were going into a bomb shelter, the children's physiology also was shown to be stressed and continued to be stressed long after the threat had left. But if they turned the bomb centers as something kind of like a game, even though obviously it was still serious, but they didn't show those high levels of stress. The child also didn't show that. And so the autonomic nervous systems of the mothers mirrored that of the children that the study found. And the autonomic nervous system will determine how we react or respond when a partner is present or when they're leaving. So it relates to kind of that. For instance, an anxious attached person is going to have a heightened response when they think their partner is leaving or when their partner is away from them, etc. So the attachment style predicts the feelings you have even after a breakup. And what's going on here? The anxious one is reminiscent of folks who struggle with cognitive dissonance. All right. I love the French talk, but I can't be a part of it. I love working on languages on different Twitch channels. My mother was a constant worrier and expressed her anxiety all the time. That shit rubbed off hard on me. Yeah, the study definitely validates what you're saying. And so your autonomic nervous system, romantic attachments seem to be really heavily based in autonomic coordination with your partner. And there are three, so that's one of them. There are three neural circuits that Yeah, so there are 3 neural circuits that will kind of drive love, attraction, and desire, and that's definitely one of them. And then you have the neural circuits for empathy. Now, empathy isn't the empathy that you and I think of necessarily in a way, but empathy is basically about autonomic matching. It means that there's a match of that emotional tone. And so sometimes it's beneficial to be like in the same state, and sometimes it's beneficial not to be. But interestingly, and I didn't know any of this, so in order to actually kind of mate or even to have sex and have children, you need to go through this like seesaw effect of being in a state of anxious, not anxious, but like being in a state of like the seesaw effect of your autonomic nervous system. So your sympathetic and your parasympathetic arousal. So when the mating behavior is one of autonomic regulation. The process of finding a mate is one of elevated autonomic arousal, dopamine, which involves sympathetic nervous system, and then the parasympathetic nervous system is this more associated with like that relax, like the cuddle hormone, all of that. So I'm definitely unorganized and secure. I think you mentioned, not to mention my aggressive narcissistic family, really trying to work on my emotions. Also, you can help all this. And even your autonomic nervous system, if you're somebody who's more high strung or you want to be more relaxed, there are things you can do. He doesn't go too much into them. He mentions them briefly, but you can go into them more. Or if you want to kind of be more alert, there are also things you can do. So you can help regulate your own autonomic nervous system. And he actually recommends this. And I mean, it totally makes sense. If you want to regulate it as much as you can without having, like, if you're anxious and you're trying not to be as anxious, then if you're able to learn how to soothe yourself, which you can learn how to do, that can obviously be beneficial. So interestingly, how people mate is the arc of mating is first, in order to like the pursuit of it has to do with the sympathetic arousal. So the alertness for the pursuit. So sympathetic, think of it as like you're more aroused, like kind of fight or flight. And then parasympathetic is more you're like relaxed. So again, that seesaw effect. But when you're actually sexual arousal, the actual sexual arousal itself, so the desire for it is sympathetic. Like you are desiring, you are in pursuit, you want this. But then to actually get aroused, it uses your parasympathetic system. So that is why people who think that if you're just jacked up on testosterone and dopamine, you actually can't perform. You can't get aroused, which you see people, if they do a bunch of cocaine or something, he talks about it you can't actually, get it up, and that's necessary. So then you have to tilt it for the sexual arousal. Then at point of orgasm, however, it goes back to your sympathetic system. So and then when it's afterwards and you're like more relaxed, whatever, like let's say it's a partner and now you're in that like cuddle, like after you go back to your parasympathetic system. So that is how species bond. So every single time we procreate, it involves this tilt, this seesaw going back and forth in order to procreate. So that is how our species operates. And that requires you to be kind of in sync in a way, at least in that setting, with your partner's autonomic system in order for you guys to, be on the same page usually, and mate the way we were meant to mate. So this kind of dance is us kind of coordinating with another. It's the autonomic matching that I was kind of talking about. So after ejaculation, parasympathetic kicks in and there's calm and relaxation. The neural circuits for this reside in the autonomic system, which are coordinated with empathy. This is some amazing research. I need to catch up on stuff. Watch the podcast. And I am clearly terrible at explaining. I thought I'd be better because I wrote it down, but I didn't. I said arc, sympathetic arousal for pursuit, parasympathetic for sexual arousal, then sympathetic response for ejaculation and orgasm, then return to parasympathetic. Every human is required to go through this to reproduce. And then we want to talk about the insula. So the insula is a brain area that allows us to pay attention to what's happening inside our body and split it kind of with that of your partner. So I wrote down exactly what he said about it. I thought I did somewhere. Where did I write about the insula? Okay, never mind. Maybe I'll get to it later. But basically the insula, that I wrote down his exact quote. But basically, the insula is what allows you to take your experience in the world and kind of split that attention with the experience of another person and kind of match that, which I found really interesting. You're doing a great job. Thank you. So when you're up on the seesaw, does your partner have to be down, or do you both have to be up or down at the same time? So it's kind of complicated. Now, in this mating sense, it's kind of the same, like in a way, but I'm going to talk about more in different contexts, how sometimes autonomic coordination does not necessarily mean autonomic syncing. It can, but sometimes that's not what it means. It's complicated. We're humans. But in this situation, if you're going to be in sync for sex, the pursuit versus the arousal versus the ejaculation and the after effects, a lot of times that in that context, it seems like it's in sync. The nervous systems were my favorite part of psych class. It's so crazy and complex, but it governs so much. I know. So number one, your autonomic nervous system. Number two, this empathy, the neural circuits for empathy, which this is what they're talking about. So empathy in this context, at least how I interpreted and how it was, I got from how it was explained, was that it's your ability to see your partner and where they are, where their nervous system is, and kind of coordinate with them and be able to sync up in that way in this context. And then number three, and this one's really interesting. Number three is about, where is this? You guys, I'm going back. I wrote, like, my notes are like crazy disorganized too. Number three is the neural circuit for self-delusion, which I thought was like interesting. Positive delusions. So he talks about this George Bernard Shaw claim that, quote, that love is really about overestimating the differences between individuals. And what he's talking about is that basically in love and attachment, we put so much value in the other that we forget that many of the processes that are going on in the brain and body can be evoked by others. Now, Huberman kind of critiqued this by saying that's overlooking attachment and how much attachment can contribute to especially long-term relationships and how attached we are to our partners. But this third category in self-delusion basically refers to this idea that this person is the only person that can make me feel this way. And that has a lot to do with how attached you are to that person. So the insula, which is cortex, is strongly activated by touch, for example. And insula is the place where this is what I want to say. We start to take the day experience, start to take our experience of our internal landscape and attach that to our external landscape and assign that a value. So that's how he said it. It makes sense to me. But touch is a big part of this because touch kind of turns into love, which then turns into attachment. And positive delusion, this idea that we can have in our brains that this person is the only person that can provoke this in us, this idea that nobody else can make me feel this way, even though it's not necessarily true. The more you feel like that, the more you have that positive delusion, they call it, that is very predictive of long-term relationships lasting. How much of that positive delusion do you have? And a lot of that is triggered by your sense of attachment, which is, I think, really fascinating. I believe it would be relatively more difficult for men to do as far as empathize from a biological standpoint. I don't know. He didn't really go into the differences between men and women in this part of it. Later, maybe he did a little bit, which I'll get into. But obviously, both men and women experience this. And he does emphasize that, or it would be very hard for us to reproduce. So maybe there are slight differences in the way men and women, and there are definitely differences in the way men and women maybe experience desire, love, and attachment, and maybe how those things come about for us. But this idea of the seesaw tilt and the parasympathetic and the sympathetic system kind of going back and forth and being able, this autonomic coordination is definitely the case for men and women, as we were talking about romantic relationships, mostly in the heterosexual context, but he does also mention that this can be in multiple contexts. And although a lot of this research is based on heterosexual monogamous relationships, that it could likely probably expand to all kinds of relationships. Interesting on the self-delusion needed for love. Reminds me a bit about depressed people being shown to be more realistic. Yeah. I like really, that was like really interesting to me, but it makes total sense. So yeah, the neural circuits associated to positive delusions. The neural circuits that are active with love can actually be active through different mechanisms, not just love by that one person, but our perception of that is very predictive of long-term relationships. So I thought that was really interesting. Yeah, they get access. The idea that this person can soothe my autonomic nervous system and this is the only person that can, and our attachment to that person because of that positive self-delusion is essential for long-term relationships, which is really interesting. All those back, and she touches you back, you're in, so to speak. I kind of talked about this in my 2 podcasts ago, where I talked about signs that a girl likes you. So I like that. My mouth is like too much talking. I filmed a YouTube video before this, not on this, but I had to film it 3 times because first my mic wasn't working, then I had my hair covering the mic, and then so I had to film it 3 times. So I never want to talk again after tonight. And you guys know I'm already like very jumbled with my words. For the most part, it's not an absolute for everyone. More widely received, and that's why women are more emotionally regulated and understanding of how they feel, which is why some men interpret women as feeling as hysterical. Good take. Maybe. So then he talks about, all right, so we know what can make people kind of, what kind of attracts people to each other and what can make relationships fall apart. So I had heard of this study before. So this one I'm actually familiar with. It is done at the University of Washington by actually a couple, the Gottmans. And they looked at, and if you took psych class, you probably heard of this one too, maybe, where they looked at video interactions between couples, and just by those video interactions with couples, they were able to predict divorce with a 94% accuracy. How crazy is that? How crazy is that? They were able to predict whether these couples would stay together or not stay together, that with that much accuracy based off of these video interactions. So what are they seeing in these video interactions? The 4 things that will predict whether or not a couple is going to stay together is, so this is kind of they call it the 4 horsemen of apocalypse for relationships. That's what they called it. So that's wow. So there's almost no choice involved. I don't know what that's pertaining to, but when they would see in these video interactions, criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and contempt, they would look and see how much of that they could see in couples, and then they would be able to predict whether or not they would get divorced. So criticism, when you criticize your partner and you're basically implying there's something wrong with them. Defensiveness, when you attempt to defend yourself from a perceived attack with a counter complaint, you are being defensive. Stonewalling happens when the listener withdraws from the conversation. Emotional response is completely cut off. It's like focusing on own internal state. And contempt. Contempt was the big one. What did they call contempt? Did I write it down? Oh, they called it sulfuric acid of a relationship. It's like the inversion of the autonomic coordination. Here you are like, this is like contempt is if you show a lot of contempt, if there's a relationship and one partner or another partner, and they're seeing a lot of contempt in the relationship, it's pretty good indication that there's going to be a divorce. Put yourself on a higher ground than your partner. You feel that person is beneath consideration, worthless or deserving scorn, disregard for something that should be taken into account. It's the antithesis of empathy, and positive delusion. So think about that, right? Instead of this positive delusion that this person is can regulate my autonomic system and this person is the only one who can, this is kind of like sulfuric acid for that. Inversion of circuits for desire, love, and attachment. Jasmine further validating why she's into / looking for traditional marriage. Yeah, maybe. I don't know if I didn't think about it that way, but now I'm gonna be like, are autonomic systems coordinated or are they just synced? Are they This might make my dating life harder. And the book that they have a lot of published like books and stuff on this, but study, I get that it's the rehab. Oh, hopefully I'm back. Looks like I was glitching, but yeah, the Gottman Institute Love Lab. If you guys are interested, I have looked at that before. It was years ago. I think I was not even. I was like my junior year of college when I really dove into it. So I want to look at that again. I was hoping I could do it before the podcast, but you could do it anytime. Next thing you talked about that was really interesting is study done by Helen Fisher, which I'm really familiar with her. I see her a lot on Big Think. I don't know if you guys follow that channel on YouTube, but Big Think, she's on there a lot, and she's done a lot. She's basically like, at the forefront of researching attachment, love, and biology and all that. But she actually she did a huge study, and I think she got it. She used like millions of people from Match.com or like dating websites, and she put people into 4 categories. Using like using testosterone and estrogen, which most of us are familiar with, and then using serotonin and dopamine. So dopamine and testosterone kind of work together in the pursuit we talked about earlier. They're kind of like cousins, and then serotonin and estrogen kind of work together. So the 4 groups that she put people in based off of the millions of people she was looking at, these labels are a bit subjective. Do they operationalize them so we all know what contempt is? Yeah. So it's not like contempt, like, okay, but this is what I mean. Like she's not looking at these videos and she's not looking at whether the people feel contempt. They're looking at them and they're looking at behaviors that signify that there is what they define as contempt, which they lay out, obviously. And that's what they're looking at. They're not looking at like, videos of people being like, I'm showing you contempt, and this is what contempt means to me. This wasn't like an interview she did with the couples. I think that's where you're maybe getting it a little confused. She wasn't looking at couples and interviewing them. Do you feel like your partner shows contempt towards you? She was looking at how they would interact. And I don't know why I'm saying it's both of them. So I don't know if that was your question, but let me know if it wasn't. So the 4 groups are, one group, they was the high dopamine group. So these are people that are high sensation seeking. They like novel things. Yes, you answered it. Okay, yeah. So I think that's what you were confused about. She wasn't interviewing them, or they weren't interviewing them. They were observing them and their interactions just as a couple through videos. So yeah, they like new things and they're adventurous. The second group was the serotonin group, which these are like homebodies. They prefer like soothing. They like rules. They like stability more than being like spontaneous. And she found that in those 2 groups, people were more likely to be attracted or like people in the same group. So if you were high dopamine, you liked partners that were also high dopamine. Now that group a lot of times had shorter, they didn't have as much, long-term relationships. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. Like not everyone needs to have a long-term relationship, and not everyone's going to be happy as a long-term relationship. If you're dopamine high and you like, new things and novel things and adventure, you're probably not going to be very happy with that. And if you're high in serotonin, or what she considers that, she didn't actually like test this. Like, it's not like she looked into, or, she did some kind of testing and was like, oh, you have more dopamine, and you like, this is just how she categorized it based off of her research. There's a translation of this book in French. I'm sure there is. These are really big studies, especially the Gottmans. And again, these are generalizations. So it doesn't mean that you fall directly. Like, that's why she calls it dopamine high, serotonin high. So it doesn't mean that you have to be a homebody 24/7 and you like rules and you like all that and you never want to go on an adventure. But in general, she did break down people into these 4 categories, and they tend to mate with people in the same group. Now, third group, what she called the director, were people that she considered testosterone high. And this didn't necessarily mean that you were a man. There were women and men in all of these groups. These people tend to be very directive. They tend to know what they want. They are challenging to be around, and they push the other, and they are challenging to be around, and they push the other people up. Great note taking. They pair up with the next category. So the estrogen high people, which is the follower, their preferences were nurturing. They like being heard, but they like when somebody else kind of makes those hard decisions. And so interestingly, the first two groups liked people similar to them, but the last two groups, they liked each other. So that's kind of what we're talking about when we say that it's more autonomic coordination, more so than syncing. So you don't always find somebody perfectly similar to you. And I really like how Huberman talked about it, where it's not one or the other. We hear opposites attract, but then we also hear that people like people similar to them. And it's not that one is false and one is true. In some contexts, opposites do attract. In other contexts, we do like people that are similar to us. So it's not like a quick, like, this is the rules, which obviously makes sense because we're talking about human pair bonding and attachment and all that, which is going to be complex. But the key here is that we like our autonomic nervous systems to be coordinated with that of our partner. And that is going to determine how attracted we are to our partner, how attached we are to our partner, how much we desire our partner, etc. Can you give me the title, please? The title of which one? I'm talking about like multiple things. So this book, which I was talking about in the beginning, it's called Attached. It's by Amir Levine and Rachel Heller. The study that I was just talking about is a study by Helen Fisher. So you could just Google Helen Fisher and you'll probably find it. And then the, actually I wrote the book down for the Gottman one. Somewhere. Yeah, it's the 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work, a practical guide from the country's foremost relationship expert. If the moderator or if someone wants to write, or maybe somebody could type it, or the moderator can type it and then put up his own comment. I don't know. The tech stuff, I don't know about. So through a recognition of these categories, we can gain better self-awareness and navigate healthier mate-seeking breakups and long-term relationships. In all romantic attachments, there is autonomic coordination. So people tend to select other people that have resting brain states that are different or opposite to them, and sometimes not. It's not about finding someone who is someone just about you or just opposite to you. Matching of the same to same or same to different can both be effective. So it's either opposites or similars depending on autonomic syncing. So autonomic coordination is the key. So just like sometimes you want somebody, if you're upset, you want them to, like, not that they have to be upset too, but sometimes you want them, to be in the same place as you. When you're happy and something's going great for you, you want them to also be happy. There are other times where sometimes that opposite, you want somebody kind of opposite than you. So if you're very high strung and you're really stressed, or you're very anxious, if your partner's also really anxious, that's not going to be great either. So basically there's no right answer, but understanding these things and understanding how you work, understanding your attachment system, understanding your autonomic response can help you navigate other people and maybe better your needs, kind of like Attached was talking about. There we go. Attached, the new science of adult attachment. That's the attachment styles book. I would start with that. That's the only book out of the ones I've talked about that I read, but I mean, that's the only book. Helen Fisher's study is just a study. And okay, we're actually doing good on time. So the last thing I want to talk about, which this was super interesting to me, is self-expansion. Okay. This was like blew my mind. So self-expansion is the metric of one's perception of self as seen through the relationship of others. So basically, we're all on the scale of self-expansion. So the theory of self-expansion is that a lot of times we, especially in the early stages, we seek out others because of how they make us feel about ourselves, interestingly. So I did actually pull up this study because I was really interested in it. Don't know if I'll actually read the whole thing right now, because I would rather get to the discussion because we have like half an hour. But Yeah, people are motivated to enter relationships to enhance themselves. This is strong at the beginning of the relationship. Pleasure, arousal, and excitement give rise to self-expansion. How others make us feel about ourselves, or how others make us feel, is a strong parameter of how we feel about ourselves. So then they did this study where I keep seeing my own comment, or my moderator wrote it for me, and I keep thinking it's somebody else's comment. I'm like, why are they using me as a profile picture? But basically they brought in a bunch of people, and they gave these couples, or these people, they figured out where they were on the scale of self-expansion, and then they gave them a narrative, like a letter from their partner. And the control group, it was just a positive memory, and then the other people would get a letter that gave them high good things about them, that inflated their idea, that really stroked their need for this self-expansion, their desire for it. And then they looked at the brain imaging of all these people, and as they would see other very attractive faces. So some people like to link this to how likely you are to cheat and infidelity. Huberman said that he doesn't think it's enough to make that link, but it is really important, or it is really interesting. And they found that people who had a high rate of self-expansion didn't find others like other people that weren't their spouse as attractive. So people who got that narrative, got that need fulfilled, that felt, like their partner really kind of inflated them, told them they were special, told them great things about them, they didn't find other people as attractive. People that didn't get that narrative and also were high on the scale of self-expansion would find other people through the study, through the brain imaging, they were far more likely to notice other people and rate other people or see other people outside of their partner as more attractive. So in the context of relationships, self-expansion, people that are, high on this scale of self-expansion, need to know that they are individually vital to the dynamic of the relationship. So they need to feel really good. Their self-perception is more dependent on how their partner feels about them, how their romantic partner makes them feel about themselves. That's a better way to put it. Whereas people not as high in that, people who get their sense of self more from themselves, are not going to be affected by this. They didn't show this much of a difference whether or not their partner kind of fulfilled that for them or made them feel good about themselves. Those people were not as likely to find other people or be looking at other people in this way. And so this is not as this has been linked to showing whether a bond is actually stable. So the person who is high on this is more susceptible to attention from others because they're desperately attached to this notion of self-expansion. So point is that it is good to link our systems to each other. We want a stable internal representation of ourselves and a stable autonomic system on our own so we can find healthier relationships. So I thought that was interesting because I was like, I think I might struggle with that. Like, I think I would actually score high on this because I do find that sometimes my perception of self will start to get heavily influenced by like my partner. And so I found that really interesting. Does the book go into influence of outside factors like family and events? Just to go further, are you talking about attached? It does talk about a little bit about where we get our attachment styles from and like what we know, how much of it comes from our childhood, etc. Maybe some of it's genetic, but I wouldn't say that's the bulk of the book. The bulk of the book isn't trying to determine where we get our attachment styles from. And this book also focuses on romantic attachment, although your attachment style can determine kind of, I think, a lot of your relationships. But I think a lot of us who have a certain attachment style, like whether we're avoidant or secure or anxious, you may not be as anxious, with your friends as you are with your romantic partner, because obviously the attachment is different. Maybe audiobook in French. Yeah, I'm sure you can find this information in French. Maybe not the whole book, but I feel like, the French have probably piggybacked off this research and have teaching it in French psychology classes. I think this is about humans in general. I don't think this is specific to Americans. But yeah, that self-expansion part was so interesting to me. Although it kind of makes sense, but I never had heard about this theory of self-expansion in general. So I remember, what did this say? And a lot of people do link it to, okay, you're more likely to cheat if you're not getting your needs fulfilled, and you have this idea that other people should make you feel really great about yourself. If you're not getting that from your partner, you're more likely to look elsewhere. I agree that I think more goes into infidelity than just that, but that could definitely be a factor. So there's this, what am I looking at? Manipulation of self-expansion alters responses to attractive alternative partners. I didn't get to read it really before I had to get on here, but yeah, the extent to which individuals find such alternatives attractive has been shown to be associated with various factors in the relationship, including self-expansion. This paper presents 2 experiments that directly manipulate self-expansion to determine the effect of self-expansion on responses to attractive alternative partners. Participants primed to experience a higher need for self-expansion had better memory for attractive alternatives with self-expanding traits dissimilar to their partner versus attractive alternatives with self-expanding traits similar to their partners. Additionally, participants primed with self-expansion via video of their partner discussing ways in which life with one another is exciting, novel, challenging, had less fMRI bold response to attractive alternatives of the opposite sex in regions associated with perception of attractive faces, anterior, I'm not as singly, and medial prefrontal cortex, relative to when they were primed with love or neutral content. So interestingly, they found that those people, if the person was just talking about how much they like the relationship, they didn't get that need fulfilled. It had to be about them as an individual and how they specifically were contributing to the relationship, making them feel good about themselves. Helen Fisher has a book called The Anatomy of Love. That's my next Kindle read. I've heard of that book. I want to read that book. I really like Helen Fisher. Even if you hear her talk, I haven't read. I've seen some of her studies, but I never read her book. After I finish my books relating to psychopaths, I will definitely give these books. I need to give them a more of a study, because I listened to this 2-hour podcast and I was going to go really look at this research and be able to articulate it better to you guys. But like my day just got away from me and it was already like almost time for me to come on here. So I was like, let me just give the same kind of summary I got kind of by listening to the Huberman podcast and talk about it with you guys. And then like, I know I want to look into this stuff more. So maybe you guys can look into this stuff more too. You can always email me or DM me on any of the platforms that I run. If you guys are like, hey, I found this interesting, or hey, I found that interesting, or, oh, I don't think you fully explained this. This is another part of that could add to the conversation. And we could even do like in the beginning of my future streams, like things that you guys maybe thought of or found, or comments, because maybe you don't have that now while you're just hearing about it. But if you go look into it later, you might have more additional commentary on it. So I love stuff like this. I'm like such a nerd. And obviously I knew about attachment styles. I'd read this like a long time ago. And the Gottman one I knew, but I didn't know any of the other ones. I obviously had heard of Helen Fisher, but I looked more into her research on pair bonding. And when I did the episode on monogamy versus non-monogamy, which is very much harder to determine, I looked into some of her work on that, which isn't super extensive, but that study to me is really interesting, and how people look for, depending on what category you're in, what you're looking for. And a lot of times what you're looking for is somebody that's going to coordinate with your autonomic nervous system. How crazy is that? We're just some fucking animals, huh? Self-delusion. For the time we have here, I think you did a good summary. Thank you. of this. I know Hazard Stint said that too. He's like, you're doing fine. I'm like, really, guys? I'm intrigued about the attachments and relationships, but I often find myself losing interest in the idea of exploring them myself. I'd rather learn about how other people do it. Well, this book is a really easy read, and super like practical. So I would maybe give that a try. No, you could just like, you could literally, there's a lot of information about this online nowadays. And I think that's great because your attachment style is going to explain your behavior, why you behave the way you behave. And it's also going to explain the behavior of your partner. So for instance, like if somebody's has an avoidant attachment style, then instead of thinking that it's you and you're the problem, why are they emotionally distant? Why are they afraid of intimacy? Is it me? You're going to be like, no, that's just their attachment style. That's just who they are. And I think what's really interesting about this book is it goes into the evolutionary advantages of all of them and kind of how we became the way that we became. Sorry, my sister. Anyways, like how there was an evolutionary advantage to all of them. So why maybe at what point maybe an anxious attachment style was evolutionary advantageous and why maybe other ones weren't, and why avoidant people may be avoidant. But the point is that we have this genetic evolutionary predisposition to one type of attachment style, and then that can also be triggered by how nurturing and attentive our parents were. And there could be a lot, we don't know exactly how people get the attachment style that they get. We do know that it can change too, but you are predisposed to one or another. And that is going to not only explain your behavior, but instead of sitting there and analyzing, why is this person being like this? Why is this person being like that? And what I really like about the book is that it doesn't like demonize an attachment style, and it kind of explains it as like, oh, there's nothing wrong with you. Like if you're an insecure attached person, there's nothing wrong with that. You've evolved the way you were supposed to evolve, and you're actually doing things right by feeling these things. And there are even some advantages to being an insecure attached person. You are really able to read other people. Now you're going, as long as you can control it and learn how to control it, which the book talks about ways you can do that, you actually can have an advantage because you're going to be able to read changes in your other people's feelings and whatever better than like avoidant people. And there's been studies that shows that anxious attached people are able to perceive emotions in other people's faces and stuff like that. That's one of them I think was in the book, where they're able to, oh, this person is how the other person is feeling, whereas avoidant people couldn't see it. So there is like, advantages to all of them. Obviously being secure is great, and if you want to be with somebody who's secure. But if you're secure, even if you're secure and you have a partner who's avoidant or anxious, if you know how to deal with that and navigate that, you can have a strong, healthy bond. Now, I also think it's a great book because if you are anxious and then you realize your partner is avoidant, or if you're avoidant and you realize your partner is anxious, it's, you're going to be like, okay, this is probably not going to work, right? So I feel like more people should be looking at this over things like astrology, like I mentioned. Yeah, she is an anthropologist. Yeah, really interesting stuff. All of it. I want to look more into the self-expansion stuff. Definitely on my list. And then also the Helen Fisher categories. Hi, Latin Heat. We're glad you're here. We got about 20 minutes. If anyone wants to talk about things, discuss things, maybe I can pull up these studies more. I love you all above all. Jasmine, sorry, guys. Thank you. I'm sure they'll understand. I got international reach here. So what is your take on attachments as they relate to the ones in your life with this deeper insight? As somebody who like, I feel like understanding my attachment style, just like Hazard Stint did, helps me not make everything when dealing with other people about me. It's under, because I feel like we all have a tendency to do that. So even when, like, I feel like I have dealt with some avoidant attachment style people, and I thought, oh, I was the problem. And avoidant attachment style people behave in ways like, there's this idea of the phantom X, where when they're with that person and they have this fear of intimacy, they get really detached. But then once the person's gone, they have this idea to look at that partner with rose-colored glasses, because they're no longer fearing that intimacy. And if they have a partner now who they fear that with, they're going to be like, oh, that girl I was with before was so amazing, so great. They're going to look at all the positives, and they tend to come back, and they tend to really chase after this phantom X. That they seem to think, avoidant people seem to think that there is this idea of the one that's going to be perfect, and it isn't, because they are afraid of that. And so they think that it's always somebody that's far away, that's not giving them this fear. So a lot of times in my life, I was like, what is up with this person? Like, why are they like randomly now like obsessed with me? And I was like, is it? And then now I'm like, oh, it's not even me. It's just I'm not around you anymore. And so you have this perception of me that's like this. And so I feel like understanding this stuff has been able to really better navigate my relationships, and also explain why I feel the way I feel. Like, and a lot of times it doesn't have to even do with that person. So even the self-expansion stuff, I'm excited to explore, because I've noticed this sometimes. I'm like, I don't know if I really like them, or I just like the way they make me feel about me. And that can be a really heavy driving factor in attraction, and how, how that works, and for everybody, but especially if you're higher on that scale, you can identify that, and you can even improve. What do you usually do on stream? So on this stream, I like to talk and be nerdy with my other nerds. I'm sad Treacherously is in here. I miss him. And then after this, I go live on my OnlyFans, where I get freaky deaky, and this comes off. So did somebody ever break your heart, or do you see it more as another disappointment? I don't understand that dichotomy, like one or the other. Have I ever been really upset at the end of an attachment bond? Yes. I don't think I saw it as a disappointment, maybe obviously at the time, but I don't know. For those that don't know your story like myself, what's your background, where you grew up? I am Persian, and I am a licensed attorney who decided that I didn't want to work a 9-to-5 and live a traditional life. So I became an online sex worker. And while doing that, I realized that I have an audience, and I also have things that I find interesting that I want to talk about and create like a community online. Hence why I started Twitch. And instead of being like, at first I was like, well, what are other people doing on Twitch? They're playing video games, they're doing this. And I was like, I'm just going to be myself. I'm interested in this kind of stuff, and maybe some other people are interested in this kind of stuff too. So I'm going to just talk about what interests me. And I do that here and on YouTube, etc. And then I show my sexy side through my sex work. And I really enjoy my job now. I think it's more Jasmine who breaks hearts. I think that's happened as well. You get the best of both worlds. Thank you. Yeah, for sure. This book gives some good insight on how to adapt with these styles, but also explain how these styles work. Hopefully it gives awareness. Yeah, and it also gives you tools on maybe becoming more, like, depending on which style you are, tips to help you, right? So if you're, I know one of the tips for like insecure attached people was like, instead of kind of getting yourself out of that positive self-delusion and trying to like, instead of dating one person and like as soon as you're interested in them, putting all your eggs in that basket, expand, and that's helped. And depending on what style you are, there are ways that you can work towards becoming more secure, because at the end of the day, you want to work towards that. Do you still have a law license? Yes. Breaking hearts, opening minds. No, you know what? I'm going to be very honest with y'all. I've never been married, but the four horsemen or whatever that the Gotchams identified, I be doing that shit. And in my relationships, and obviously they hasn't ended well. I've had partners that have not been any of those. Like I've had partners, stonewalling has not been me, but contempt and defensiveness, and what was the other one? Stonewalling, contempt, defensiveness. It's gonna bother me unless someone wants to put it in the comments. This is I do that too. So don't to me because we would 100% get divorced. The dude you're making content with, is he your boyfriend? No, he's not. He's just a friend. Yes, Twitch stream is 6:30 Pacific time every Monday, and then it's to 9, and then at 9 we go to my OnlyFans. It is $6.99 to join. As soon as you pay that, you get access to all my streams and the content that I have on my wall. So you don't need to pay anything extra once you get into that. Once you're in, you have your subscription, you get access to all the streams. Breaking hearts and breaking down biases. I'm the luckiest friend in the world. Friend too. It was just so random. Like I didn't like plan on we didn't like get together like let's make content, but it happened. I don't have a lot of like casual sex, so I always wanted to bring you guys content with somebody else, but this situation never arose, and so it arose in this context. So I was like, oh, okay. What is the name of the book you're talking about tonight? So one of them, the attachment styles one, it's called Attached, The New Science of Adult Attachment and How It Can Help You Find and Keep Love. And it's by Amir Levine and Rachel Heller. Oh, it arose all right. Can you consider doing the OF part a little earlier? It's 11 a.m. where I am. I mean, you're worth it, but I'm old. I get it, but the problem is like people are all over, and so it's hard to coordinate with everybody. I can run a poll on my OnlyFans, and even with you guys, if you guys would like me to move it a little earlier or a little later. My moderator is also out of the country, so I think this is morning his time, so I can't have it like be in the middle of the night his time. So we gotta work around it. Also, if you guys prefer a different night, but I really like Mondays, Monday Fun Days. I feel like nobody looks forward to Mondays, and if my brain or my titties can make that a more enjoyable Monday night experience for you, then I feel like that's a win. Me, I cannot realize Jasmine on Twitch is the same person who I see in Reddit. Yeah, but people are multifaceted, and you can see people in different contexts. I had a subscriber who I really like on my OnlyFans tell me like, hey, this is really weird for me because like I feel I struggle now because I've seen you in like Twitch and YouTube, and now I feel weird looking at you in a sexual way. I'm like, why? I understand that maybe naturally you may be inclined to be like, but if I see you in this way, then I can't see you in that way. But I mean, isn't that how you would see a partner anyway? I'm not saying I'm your partner, but like in certain contexts, you see them as a sexual being. In other contexts, you don't. So this idea of like objectification, I mean, you kind of objectify everybody in a sexual context, but you can also have a conversation with me. Many of you have a conversation with me here and then jerk off to me in 10 minutes. And it works out. Like, it doesn't have to be this thing. We're all human beings and we're fucking animals at the end of the day. And I don't see why you can't be like, hey, she's a cool person and she has big titties. Joss said she's our partner. Verbal is binding. Oral contracts can be binding. Heck, I'm looking at your OnlyFans right now. It's kind of radical. Oh, I love you guys. I like Monday night schedule as long as it's working well for you. Double features, prime option. Yeah, I didn't used to do it on the same night, but then like one time I would just ended up doing it the same night, and so many of you like loved it and would go in there. Like I know Puerto Rican Pa is always in that. Hazard Stin is always in there. Dennis. Oh, wait. Sorry, I'm getting confused because some of you have the same name, some of you have different names. A couple other people usually are in it. That was the first night I came over. Yeah. So yeah, because you're Dennis, right? On the other one. There's also a couple other people that usually come. And then I always have new people that come that maybe aren't regulars, but they come, and then I really like. Who is Dev from OnlyFans? Who is he in here? Because he's the one I was talking about that sent me that message, and he said he was looking forward to the streams tonight. So I wonder if he's in here. You three are the ones that I always remember because I interact with you guys a lot. That'd be you. Okay. You're the one. Yeah. So I appreciate you guys being here. And I enjoy this so much. And I love that I have the freedom to do this. And for me, this part is not about really making money, because the hour and a half I spend on here could, if I was just trying to maximize my profits, I would be doing other things. But I love this. And if I can impact one person, which I know I've impacted more than that, because I get messages all the time from people who either watch my YouTube or watch this, and they say I made them think about things differently, especially as it pertains to sex work, because that's one of my main goals here, is to try to break that barrier and that stigma with sex work, and to show that sex workers are change the narrative surrounding sex workers and sex work in general. So I feel like I've already succeeded, because I know I have made some people think about things differently. And I want to continue to do that, because the more people I can reach, the better. Dang, I won't be able to see your OF lives on Mondays. I'm sorry. Maybe once, sometimes I do multiple in a week, but I'm so busy that usually I can just do the one. You do have the option to buy them after. I'm also thinking of, with my Fansly account, when I do get that going, to do a live stream on Fansly once a week too. It won't be Monday nights, but that one I'm thinking of making free to everybody on Fansly. So I haven't figured out exactly how I'm going to do that yet, but my OnlyFans lives, I do put them out right after, if you didn't join it live, or if you did join it and you want to watch it again, because a lot of people want to watch it again, especially since sometimes they're like 30 minutes and to an hour, and you can just watch me, like be naked for a fucking hour and have some fun. So that option is available to you. Well, her Reddit content is just promotional. Our extra content is her changes of her she. Yeah, I had and people like to lie on my Reddit, because they, they're angry, and like I had somebody be like, someone asked, "Do you have sex tapes on your OnlyFans?" And I was like, "Yeah," and the person's like, "No," like he didn't even say, because yeah, my sex tapes are behind a pay, like you have to pay extra for them. They're not included in the $6.99, but they're like, "No, she doesn't have any. It's just her Reddit stuff, and her Reddit stuff is behind a paywall." But I was like, what? First of all, my Reddit stuff is all recycled. I make one maybe new Reddit post per week, and the rest, I'm going to tell you the truth, Reddit has a 3-month thing. So like reposts, they have like usually a 3-month thing. So I go back exactly what I posted 3 months ago, and I recycle those. On my OF page, nothing on that wall is the same. So there's over 1,000 pictures. There's over like 600 videos, and those are all new. I post multiple times a day. I do those live streams. You can interact with me. And then obviously you have the option. You get the previews and the little short clips from, like, you get the short clips or pictures from my sex tapes that you can look at. And then if you want the full thing, then you can have the option to buy it. Also, I do bundle deals. So if you buy like 3 or 4 videos, then it comes down to like $10 a video. For full length videos. So I think that's more than reasonable. Fansly, I prefer. Honestly, I really think I would prefer it too, because they seem to be much more sex worker friendly. I'm not that OnlyFans isn't, but I think I like them better too. I just haven't hopped on that boat because OnlyFans is more popular, but I plan on doing it. I'm just doing like the verifications and stuff. I always have it on my list, and then it just goes down and down. Like I have been trying to do a video for Cam Soda in so long. Poor Molly, she has been on my ass. She's like, "It's okay." I'm like, "Thank you for being patient." Like there are things on my to-do list that just constantly get put down, and starting my Fansly is one of them. It probably says something about me, or several somethings about me, that I still look forward to your Reddit post despite being sub to your OnlyFans and follow you on Twitch. I feel like my Reddit posts are curated to be like those shorter clips. So a lot of people that go to Reddit. It's like if you want to see a bunch of like titty drops, you'll go to Reddit because you're going to see like a bunch of them in a row. Whereas my OnlyFans, you're going to see pictures, you're going to see some titty drops, you're going to see a bunch of like different kind of stuff as you go down. So I can see why, you know, if you follow me on multiple platforms, why you may be in the mood for different things at different times. All right, have a good night. I'm going to be hopping off here in a few minutes too. Yeah, Reddit is a promotional platform for you that is not updated. Yeah. But it is great. And if people are like, oh my God, you know, if people can already see you naked on Reddit, why would they want to subscribe to your off? I'm like, they do, you know, if there are people who all they need is Reddit, that's great. But people who want more, go to my OF. And I have a very high rebill rate, which I'm very proud of. I think the average rebill rate percentage on OnlyFans is like 20%. Mine is well over 50% of my fans have their rebills on. I think it's close to probably like 70% have their rebills on. And that means that's an indication to me that I'm providing them valuable enough content for the price that I'm charging, that they feel like it's worth it to remain subscribed to my page, even though the majority of them have also found me on Reddit. So that ain't saying much since OF Tech should be exiled to the days of dial-up. Yeah, hoping Fansly is better with that. I know I'm not leaving OnlyFans. No. I would not leave OnlyFans. I'm just saying I might add Fansly to my repertoire. No, leaving OnlyFans would not be the move. Oh, I'm so happy to hear that, Puerto Rican Pa. And everything on OnlyFans is awesome. What you provide for the flat rate in your videos are top shelf. Thank you. And then, yeah, my live streams, I do have a tip goal. So people that can tip, do tip. And I know a lot of you guys do, which I appreciate, but you don't have to. The point is that if people who can do, and if enough people who can just do a little bit, because it's not a lot, then it becomes a great experience for everybody, right? And then you don't have to pay whatever amount to see me have some fun on camera. And also on there, I can answer your sexy questions, which I can't do here. Your rebill rate is high because your stuff is high quality. Pay attention. Thank you. I also do make sure that I said this before, but I will never have some like foreign agency in there, like messaging you guys like, hi. And like, you know, I don't do that. I like to be authentic. And so that does mean that maybe I can't sit there and talk to all my fans about how their day is going. And most of the times, and I'm not saying this for everyone, when I was a smaller creator, I would have the time to do that. But if you're a bigger creator and you are doing other things, then I have thousands of fans on there. In my time on there, I've had over 50,000 people subscribe, which I'm so happy about. More than that, way more than that. That's just active. Not active currently, but you know. And I definitely do not have the time to have one-on-one interactions with that many people. So, but I do make sure that if you're messaging me on there, then you're not going to get somebody who's just trying to sell to you. That is one thing I will not do. When people say, are your videos worth it? I'm like, that's for you to determine. I'm not here to try to tell you, you should definitely buy this or you should definitely buy this. I put out a product or a service. And if you're interested, then you can purchase the service. And the advertising I do for it, depending on what it is, whether it's Twitch or it's, my OnlyFans on Reddit, you guys see the advertising. There's no like, please. I try not to do that. Like, come subscribe, come do that. Not knocking people that do, but I feel like my method is very much, you know what you're getting. And that's it. All right. If you guys want to go to my page, do that. Yeah, you can go to jazzylicious.org. The link will be there. And I am going to go to the bathroom really quickly, so I don't need to go for my live. And then I will hop on. Is there a promo code you could offer a Twitch fan? I love that. If you are watching my Twitch right now, and it has to be now, I'm trying to figure out how I can make sure that it's done properly. Okay, if you are on here and you are not subscribed to my OF, or if you are and you want your next month free, if you message me on Instagram, my new Instagram, and you send a screenshot of your username, your username, so I know it's you, like your Twitch page and your username. And I wonder if does my moderator have access to these comments after? I have to figure out how to do it. So maybe next time I have to figure out how to make sure I can do it so that people who watch this later aren't going to try to take advantage of it, because I can't give like thousands of people. I know my Twitch views don't get that many streams, but they do get more after the stream is over. And I want to give that option to the people who were in here live and contributed. Time limit or deadline. Yeah, I'll figure it out, but I do like that idea. Hold on, my monitor something. I think I can see them after, but not sure. All right. Well, if you're a name that I can clearly see and know, you guys can do that now. But otherwise, well, I'll figure it out maybe for later. That's my new Insta. But anyways, it's not even that expensive. It's $6.99. If you do multiple months, it's even less. And I do appreciate that a lot of you guys do actually just want to support me too. So I'm going to go over there. I don't want to be late. I know a lot of people are waiting and I need to pee. So I'm going to go and have them email the podcast email. That's also another option. That's a good idea. And my moderator has access to that, so he can maybe find a way to confirm that you guys are really you. I hate having to do that, but you guys would be surprised at how many people, like I have done TikTok streams before where I'm like, oh, whoever helps me think of this name, which actually my sister helped me think of the Thoughts with Thoughts. So she didn't want a free subscription to my OnlyFans. I offered it to her. But you would be surprised how many people change their usernames, whatever, and then send me a screenshot and pretend it's them. Like, I don't want to get into all that. So we'll see. But I have to go for now. Can't figure this out now. So I'm going to leave. If you're going to be there, be there. You have a few minutes before I actually start, because I'm going to pee and everything. And then also the stream, it builds up. So the good action is going to be in a little bit anyway. So see you there. Bye.